Okay, welcome to our fourth lecture about apostrophes. Before we begin talking about apostrophes, let's do a little bit of review. Our topic for this series of lectures is the proper use of apostrophes. And as we've discussed, there are three main reasons that we use apostrophes in written English. The one we're going to be focusing on today is to show possession or ownership or relationship. And we oftentimes call this the possessive or the genitive case. When we are using the genitive case with a noun, we're going to need to use an apostrophe. So that's an important part of that to cover. Here we have the breakdown of noun cases. The only case in which the noun itself changes in English is the genitive or possessive case. If it's in the singular form, we add an apostrophe S to the word. If it's in plural form, we don't add anything other than the apostrophe. So when spoken, the genitive, the noun and genitive case that happens to be plural sounds the same as all the other cases. It's only when it's a singular noun and genitive case that we have an extra sound, the S sound. We discussed the other way to make a possessive, which is the of blank method. This is one way to check to see if the word is possessive or not. If you can replace, in this case, Mary's eyes with the eyes of Mary, we know that Mary is in the genitive case. There's another way to test, though, and that's what we're going to focus on here. And that is our paradigm. We're going to recall the possessive apostrophe rule in English. We're going to decide whether the pronoun is in possessive case or genitive case or not. If it is in possessive or genitive case, we have to decide whether it's singular or plural. That's our third step. We discussed the first step and the second step and the third step, and now we're up to actually applying this knowledge. Again, here's the rule. We try his. If his makes sense, then we know the noun is singular and possessive. If their makes sense, we know the noun is plural and possessive. So let's use some examples. So what we're going to do is we have our sentence, Bob likes Mary's dress. What we're trying to decide is whether Mary's is in genitive case or if it's just simply plural. Okay? One mechanism is to change Mary to each one of these forms and see which one makes sense. Going back, another thing we could do, which I don't list here, is we could try the of blank construction. We'd have to add, Bob likes the dress of Mary. If that makes sense, that's another indication that when the word Mary is in front of dress, ending in an S sound, that we're really looking at the genitive case. But you know what? That involves a lot of steps. And so I've decided to focus on the pronoun change. So what I've done here is I've replaced the word Mary's with they, and then with their, and then with them, and then with he, and then with his, and then with the him. Now, of course, we recognize the word Mary usually refers to a female. And of course, these pronouns refer to men. So it might be easier to change Mary to Bill or something. Of course, we might want to change the word dress or not, as the case may be. So let's go through the example. We're replacing Mary's first with they. Bob likes they dress. When we hear that, we know that's not right. So we can cross that out, right? Bob likes their dress. That doesn't offend our ears in the same way, but it suggests that one dress is being owned by lots of people. I suppose that could happen. You might have twins or even friends that are the same dress size who wear the same dress, but that's not a common situation. So the word there kind of doesn't seem right, but maybe I'd put a question mark here. Maybe we'll think about that a little bit more. Let's look at the next one. So now we're up to the word them. Bob likes them dress. Again, we can hear immediately that is not correct. We're up to the he now. Bob likes he dress. Not going to work for us, doesn't sound right. Bob likes his dress. Well, that does sound good. Now, of course, we know that Mary is a female and the word his is masculine, so what really would sound better would be her dress. But we're going to ignore the whole gender issue, and we end up liking this one. This one sounds best. Let's look at our last choice, just to be complete. We have him. Bob likes him dress. Again, doesn't sound good to us. So we're really preferring his, but the there doesn't sound dreadful, awful, terrible. Okay? So we like Bob likes his dress best. Because we like his better than their, we know that we only have one Mary, right? And of course, we're the writer in the sentence. We know exactly how many Marys there are because we're the one writing the sentence. And so because there's only one Mary, we're going to put it apostrophe S. Remember the rule? Let's go back and look at the rule so we can get a refresher. Our rule is right here. For singular nouns, the apostrophe comes before the S. Well, Mary, we've decided is singular, so it's going to be M-A-R-Y apostrophe S. And here we go. This is the solution. So we can leverage our knowledge of pronoun case to make sure we are putting our noun in the correct case. Let's go through another example. Mary likes her cousin's colleges. So we have the word cousins. We don't know what case that's supposed to be. We don't know if it's singular or plural. So we're going to follow the same pattern. We're going to replace the word cousins with 6 different pronouns to see which one works best. Mary likes they colleges. That doesn't sound good to our ears. Mary likes their colleges. That sounds good. So let's move on. Mary likes them colleges. No, that doesn't sound right. Mary likes he colleges. No. Mary likes his colleges. This doesn't sound terrible, awful, dreadful, but it doesn't sound quite right because most people attend one college at a time. So it would be a little bit odd for one cousin to be attending more than one college. Now, it happens. There's students at Collin who go to Collin and Texas Women's University at the same time, or Collin and Texas A&M Commerce at the same time, or Collin and UNT, or Collin and UTD. So it does happen. So it's not impossible, but it's less likely. Let's look at our last one. Mary likes him colleges. Now, of course, if we are writing the sentence, we know very well how many cousins there are. At least we know whether there's one cousin or more than one cousin. So we're writing it. We don't have to play this game. We know, okay, more than one cousin, so this is going to be the correct replacement. Or if it happens to be one very studious cousin who's going to more than one college, we know this is the correct one. But we're going to assume that there's multiple cousins and they all don't go to the same college. So we know that the cousins is plural. There's more than one cousin. And we also know that because of our use of their, that it's going to be in the genitive case. And so we're going to need to have an apostrophe. Because the word cousins is plural, we do S apostrophe. Cousins becomes plural in the regular way with the addition of an S. So here's our rule. For regular nouns, the apostrophe, for regular plural nouns, the apostrophe comes after the S. So we're going to follow that rule. And we have Mary likes her cousin's college, S apostrophe. We're going to look at the third example. Mary likes her cousin's shoes. We're not sure what's going on with cousins. That's what we're trying to say. So we're going to follow the same pattern. We're going to replace cousins with these 3 and then these 3. Let's listen. Mary likes they shoes. Well, that doesn't sound right. Actually, I have a typo here. This should be shoes. Sorry about that. Mary likes their shoes. That sounds pretty good. Mary likes them shoes. No, we're not going to like that one. Mary likes he shoes. No, don't like that one. Mary likes his shoes. This sounds fine. Mary likes him shoes. That doesn't work. So we have 2. We really don't know which one's right, though, because we all have more than one shoe, right? Unless we have been a victim of a terrible accident. We have 2 feet, so therefore we need 2 shoes. So the fact that the word shoe is plural doesn't really tell us whether we're talking about multiple people having shoes or just one person having shoes. So she might have one cousin who has 4 pairs of shoes. So it would make perfect sense to say, Mary likes her cousin, apostrophe S, shoes. Or she could have 4 cousins each who have, 3 pairs of shoes, so there's 12 pairs of shoes or 24 shoes. So we mean plural cousins. Mary likes her many cousins, S apostrophe, shoes. This is inherently ambiguous. The apostrophe actually resolves the confusion, because if we put it S apostrophe, the reader knows there's lots of cousins, they have shoes. Or it could mean there's one cousin and he has more or she has more than one shoe. We don't know. The writer is going to help us resolve this ambiguity by how he places the apostrophe. And the neat thing about this is that if this were spoken, unless there were other context material, maybe higher up where Mary gives you the names of the cousins or something like that, the listener to the story wouldn't know whether there was one cousin or multiple cousins. Okay, here's our final example. Mary likes her cousins. We're trying to decide whether this is plural or singular, possessive or not. We're going to follow that exact same pattern, replacing it with the 6 pronouns. Mary likes they. That doesn't sound right to us. Mary likes their. No, that doesn't sound good, does it? Doesn't. Mary likes them. Hey, that sounds good, doesn't it? Mary likes he. No, that doesn't sound right. Mary likes his. No, that doesn't sound good. Mary likes him. This does sound good, but why would we have him? We shouldn't have an S here, right? Mary likes her cousin. That would be the right way for that to make sense. So the him doesn't explain why we've got an S here. So the one that makes sense and that fits with the sentence that we have here is them. Them is, of course, plural, so cousins is plural. Them is not in the genitive case, so cousins is not in the genitive case. So we don't need any apostrophe. So our correct form is Mary likes her cousins. Okay. Now we are on to the bitter end. You may recall when we started this presentation several lectures ago, on our first slide I said, we're going to talk about this pronoun its at the end. Kind of keep this filed away in your head, because the use of the word its causes a fair amount of confusion. And I'm going to try to unpack the confusion and show you a different way of looking at it that I hope will make it less confusing for you. That's my goal, at least, and hopefully I'll be successful. You may want to watch this section more than once so that it kind of sinks in a little bit. Okay, so you may be thinking, the pronoun its that is possessive, it doesn't have an apostrophe. It doesn't have one. Let's go back and look at the table so I can prove that to you. Look here. We have its is third person neuter, and the possessive case is this one right here. This is the one that we're looking at. And look, there's no apostrophe. In fact, on this board, with the exception of these informal ones, which I'm going to remove because they're informal, we're not going to use them in writing, none of these have apostrophes on them. I, we, you, he, she, it, they, me, us, you, him, her, it, them, my, mine, our, ours, your, yours, yours, his, her, hers, its, their, theirs, myself, ourselves, yourself, yourselves, himself, herself, itself, themselves. There's not a single apostrophe in this whole list. We don't use apostrophes to communicate possessiveness with our pronouns. We don't do it in English. So this is the way we write the sentence. It's, meaning the place of it. The book was in the place of it on the shelf. If we put the apostrophe, even though we use the apostrophe to communicate the genitive case with nouns, we don't use it with pronouns. So This one is correct. This one, not correct. Okay, so we have the two reasons. The first I've already told you. We don't use the apostrophe S with pronouns. After all, we don't say this. We don't say he's book or she's book or they's book, they's house. So why would we use an apostrophe S for its when we don't use it for he, she, they, I, you? None of the other forms do we use it for. So for consistency purposes, it makes sense that we don't stick the apostrophe in when we're talking about pronouns. That's the first reason that we don't use an apostrophe with its. But there's a second reason, and I think this reason is better. This reason is a clearer reason. Let's look at these words. The word dogs, dogs, and dogs. They are all spelled differently. I'm going to remove the quotation marks so you can see them without those quotation marks. It's a little easier to tell. So we have dogs, no apostrophes. We have dogs, which has an apostrophe S, and we have dogs, which is S apostrophe. When we see these words written, they have distinct meanings. This means more than one dog, but the dogs aren't possessing anything. This means there's only one dog, and he or she is possessing something. This means there's lots of dogs, or at least two dogs, and they are possessing something. So by punctuation, by the use of apostrophes, we distinguish these three. Spoken English, we wouldn't distinguish, and we'd have to look for context clues to figure that out. And that's why the apostrophes are so useful, because these all sound the same. So we use the apostrophes to differentiate words that sound and are spelled the same. The apostrophe helps us disambiguate those terms, to distinguish between the ambiguous terms. But we don't have any ambiguity with it. Let's go back to the form that we have here. Here we go. We have, for nominative case, we have it. For objective case, we have it. For possessive case, we have its, right? So there's no way you're going to confuse its in the possessive case with it in the objective case or it in the nominative case. Neither one of these cases end with an S. So there's no confusion, there's no ambiguity, there's no similarity in the spelling of this case versus this case, or this case versus this case. Now these two cases are spelled the same, but we're not having to worry about those with respect to the possessive. So our whole reason for using the apostrophe with the word dog to resolve the confusion doesn't even come up with the pronoun it. So that's, I guess, the first half of this reason. But the second half of this reason is that we do use, there are two times that we say it's in English. One is when we mean, let's say, how about this one? The book was in its place in the book case. So we have its. This sounds like our next sentence. It's going to rain today. In spoken English, these two sound the same, but they have different meanings, right? This means it in the possessive case, and this means it is. It is going to rain today. So if we had an apostrophe here, and we had an apostrophe here to replace the missing I, this I here to show there's a contraction, we aren't using our apostrophes to distinguish between these two. We're using them in both cases, and these are the only two words that could be confusing for each other. So it's not helping us. Our use of apostrophes here is meaningless because we're using it every time there could be confusion. So that's why we don't use an apostrophe here. Because when we see this word written, we immediately know, oh, there's no apostrophe, so the writer didn't mean that this is a contraction. Well, there's only two choices. It's either a contraction or it's a possessive form, because after all, it can't be the plural. Remember, there's three reasons that we use the S sound at the end of word: to communicate plural, to communicate possession, or to communicate contraction. But when we have more than one it, we say they, right? They or them. So its does not mean, right? No one would say its are plentiful. That doesn't communicate. We would instead say they are plentiful. Okay, so because we want to distinguish these two words to resolve the potential ambiguity, we're only going to put an apostrophe in one of them. But you may recall when we started this presentation that there are three reasons that we use apostrophes. One is to show possession, the other is to show a contraction. I can't think of any time that we don't use an apostrophe to show a contraction. Whether it's pronouns or nouns, we always use the apostrophe. I can't think of any exceptions. There might be some, but this is a pretty 100% type rule, right? But this has this exception here. And so this is a little bit less of a 100% rule. And so the reason that we don't put an apostrophe S here is because there's a contraction its that looks exactly the same. And it's not helping us to distinguish the two meanings. So that's the reason. Again, we don't ever put an apostrophe in a pronoun to make it genitive case. And we use apostrophes to resolve ambiguity. And the ambiguity we have with the word its is between the contraction form, which does have an apostrophe, and the genitive case form, which makes more sense for us to leave out the apostrophe to resolve or to help us with the ambiguity. So that's why we don't have it apostrophe s to mean possessive. Hopefully that makes sense to you. Now, the lack of that apostrophe causes some confusion because many of us know we do the apostrophe when we use genitive case. And so it's easy to think, well, I should use an apostrophe when I'm using its, because after all, it's in genitive case. You're probably not using the term genitive in your head, but you know the general idea. So this is one of these areas where, you know what, the grammar rule could have gone either way, but it went this way. I guess it stuck with the idea that we're using apostrophes to resolve ambiguity. And so remember, we don't put the apostrophe in its unless we're doing a contraction. I hope that this has helped. In our next presentation, we'll go forward and we'll resolve or handle the other two situations. Thank you for your attention. Have a good evening.